53 years married, 76 years old. I got up every morning of those years before sunrise and went to work. In the fall of the year, I put up 6 cords of wood. In the spring, I worked the bottom along Spruce Creek. I fixed what broke. I kept every promise I ever made to any man. I never quit a thing I started. And I never once, in 53 years of waking up beside Martha Lee Wilson, eating at the same table, driving to the same church every Sunday morning, I never said the words out loud to her. Not once. She knew. I believe she knew. But she would have liked to hear it, and I knew that too, and I still didn't say it. That is not a secret. That is the thing I have to live with now. When the men in the hollow used to say, "Tom Wilson, now there's a real man," they weren't talking about that part. They were talking about the work, the keeping of the word, the showing up, the not complaining. By every measure I was taught to care about, I was exactly the man my daddy raised me to be. But I want to tell you tonight what I believe stopped men from being the kind of men the people around them needed most. Not the work was real. Not the showing up, that counted. But the other thing, the thing the code forgot to teach us. I'll get there. I aim to. But first I need you to understand where I came from and what I handed down without knowing what I was doing. If you'll sit a spell with me tonight, I'd be grateful. Leave something in the comments when you're done. Tell me your daddy's name or your husband's, so the next woman who finds this knows somebody was here before her. Here is what I want you to understand first. The men I am talking about were not failures. I want to be clear before I say anything else. I see men who built their wives a house before they were 25 and kept the roof on it for 40 years. I see men who got up when it was dark and came home when it was dark and never complained about the hours between. I see men who put every cent they made into the family and kept nothing for themselves. I see men who buried their brothers and their sons and went back to work the next morning because the wood box didn't fill itself and the mortgage didn't care about grief. Those men were real. What they gave was real. But I see what the code gave them and what it took. And what it took was considerable. That is not strength. That is silence with a work ethic. Those are not the same thing. Providing is not the same as saying. A man can fill the wood box every single morning for 50 years and leave his wife feeling alone at the kitchen table on a Tuesday. One is labor, the other is presence. The code taught us to confuse them, and most of us never questioned it because the men who taught us didn't question it either. I aim to name 5 things. 5 things I believe the inheritance took from us. And I say us because I am not standing above any of this. The first thing, we were not taught to name what hurt us. Not to our wives, not to our children, not to the man next to us in the truck. I could tell you the price of a cord of wood in 1975, and I couldn't tell you what it felt like the morning my brother Curtis's body came home in a flag-covered box. I felt it the same as any man feels his brother gone at 24, but I had no language for it. Feeling it was private. Naming it was weakness. That is not courage. That is fear wearing the clothes of courage. The second thing, we gave the work instead of the words. I split every stick of wood Martha ever burned. I fixed every pipe that broke, every window that stuck. She knew what that meant. I knew what that meant. And still, the words would have cost nothing. They were free. I held them anyway. That is not love. That is love afraid to speak its own name. The third thing, we hid our grief until it turned into something harder. I could not say my son Caleb's name for 13 years. Not 13 days, 13 years. Because naming it meant feeling it. And I had been trained since I was 8 years old that you do not sit down with grief. You get up. You carry it until you forget you're carrying it, and it becomes part of your weight, and you take it with you when you go. That ain't grief. That is regret. Grief you can carry. Regret eats you. The fourth thing, we taught what we knew, which meant we taught the silence. And then we wondered why our sons were quiet. And the fifth thing, I'll get to it. But first I need to tell you where it all started, because it started before me. It started with my daddy. My daddy's name was Earl Wilson, born in this hollow in 1908. He built this cabin in 1936 with his hands and a borrowed mule. He worked the coal mines from 14 until they closed in 1958, then worked everything else. He died in 1968 of black lung. At 60, when I was 19, the hottest man I ever knew and the best man I ever knew. I never told him either one of those things while he was alive. In September of 1962, I was 13. After supper one evening, he sat across from me at this table and set a pocket knife in front of me. His father's knife. He said, "That's your grandfather's." No speech, no ceremony. He picked up his coffee and went back to reading the paper. I have carried that knife every day for 64 years. It is still sharp. It has outlasted everything else. He told me once, we were sitting on the porch, a cold evening in the fall of the year. He said, "A man does what needs doing. He don't talk about it." Once without looking up, like it was a fact of nature. And I believed him. I believed him for 60 years. Here is what I know now. That pocket knife was my daddy's love letter. He set it on that table, and he was saying, "You are the next one, and I am giving you what was given to me, and I don't have a language for the rest." He had no other language. His own daddy had given him the same thing, and Earl gave it to me. The point was never the knife. What fathers gave sons instead of words. That is the inheritance I am talking about. The work instead of the saying. The object instead of the sentence. The cord of wood in October instead of "I love you" on a Tuesday. That is not nothing. But it is not enough. It was never enough. And that is what I have been trying to understand since that October morning in 2024. First frost on the ridge, standing on the back porch with a cold cup of coffee, saying my wife's name out loud to no one, saying my dead son's name out loud for the first time in 15 years, and understanding at 75 that the silence I had kept my whole life was not love. It was fear that had outlived every reason to be afraid. I want to tell you about a man named Henry. He lived one hollow over. 73 years old the last time I saw him. Big hands, strong back. His place was always kept. He had a son named Bobby who moved to Roanoke in the late 80s. Got married, had boys of his own. Henry never called him. Bobby hadn't done anything wrong. It was simply that calling felt like asking, and asking was not what the men in this hollow had been raised to do. I asked Henry once. We were splitting wood, a cold November morning. I said, "Do you miss Bobby?" He set the maul down. He said, "Bobby's got his own life." Bobby was 4 hours down the road. Henry died in 2019 on a Thursday morning, alone in that house. And Bobby found out 2 days later when Verna at the post office called him. Bobby drove up on Saturday and walked through the house and didn't know where anything was, didn't know what his father had been reading, didn't know who had last stopped by. He knew how to split wood because Henry had taught him that. He did not know his father. That story has no good ending. I tell it because it is the truest one I know. I had a hunting partner for 30 years, a man named Hollis. Died in 2016 at 68. The hardest working man I have ever known in this county. His grandkids adored him. He took them fishing every Saturday morning from the time they could hold a rod. Never missed a Saturday. When he got sick, they set up with him near the end, the way we used to do. His granddaughter Emma, 19 when he died, came up to me after the service at Spruce Creek and said, "Mr. Wilson, did Grandpa Hollis ever say he loved us? Did he ever say the actual words?" I didn't know what to tell her. I said, "He was there every Saturday. He showed up for every one of them." Emma said, "I know." She said it quiet, the way a young person says something she's thought through 100 times. She said, "I know he did. I just wanted to hear it once." He took those words with him. There's a man in Marlinton, retired school teacher, name of Wendell, 81 now. Lost his wife 8 years back. One Thanksgiving he sat down with his son. The son was 48, gray already in his hair, and Wendell said, "I am proud of you." First time in his life. His son put his head down on the table and cried. Wendell called me after and said, "Tom, I didn't know what to do. I just sat there." He wasn't upset his son cried. He was plumb ashamed it had taken him 75 years to say 4 words that had always been true. He said, "What was I holding them for?" I had no good answer. I'd held the same words back for 53 years, and by then the woman I meant to give them to was buried behind Spruce Creek Baptist. Now, the 5th thing, here it is. We passed it on. I passed it on. My daddy handed me that knife in 1962 and said, "That's your grandfather's." In 1984, my son Daniel was 16. Good boy, quiet and capable. Did what was asked without complaint, which I had taken for normal because it was all I'd ever taught him. I reached into my pocket and handed him that same knife and said, "This was your granddaddy Earl's, and nothing else. Not I love you, not I am proud of you." I gave him the object and let the object carry the rest. I handed down the knife and the silence in the same motion without knowing it. He was 16 and took it the way I had taken it at 13, quietly, without asking for the sentence that should have followed, because Wilson men do not ask for those sentences. He is 56 now. He lives in Charlotte. He calls me on the first Sunday of every month at 4 in the afternoon, and we talk for 23 minutes. He asks about the weather. I ask about the grandchildren. We say everything except the thing we both know, that we are 2 men who love each other in a language neither of us fully learned, and we are running out of time to find a better one. I reckon we both know it. I reckon neither one of us says it. That is the 5th reason. Not only what our fathers did to us, what we did with what they gave us. My daddy Earl was not cold. He came up in the Depression, went into the mines at 14, kept going through everything the mountain ever handed him. He had been given the silence by a man who had been given it before him, going back further than I can trace. 4 generations of Wilson men giving each other everything except the words. Every one of them thought that was the whole of love. It was not the whole of love, but not one of them was a monster. They were captives. All of them captives of the same code that nobody had written down and nobody had voted on. It had just passed from hand to hand like a pocket knife, each man receiving it and handing it on without asking what else should have come with it. My daddy gave me that knife and meant, "You are mine and I am proud." I gave it to my son and meant exactly the same. Neither of us knew until too late that there was another language, and that the other language was what the people around us had been waiting for all their lives. Now there is something I want to mention before I let you go. I almost don't want to. Ruth Ann would be after me if I didn't say it, so I'll say it briefly. About a year after Martha passed, I started writing letters, by hand at this kitchen table after supper. Letters to her. Letters to my boy Caleb. Letters to my daddy Earl. Letters to my brother Curtis. I called it The Things We Don't Say. Letters I should have given when there was still somebody to give them to. I wasn't going to show them to anyone. Then my daughter Ruth Ann came by one Wednesday with supper, and before I could stop her, she saw the box on the table and sat on the back porch and read 3 of them. 20 minutes out there. Came back inside red-eyed and said, "Daddy, you have got to let other people see these. There are mamas out there. There are widows. They need to read these." I said no for about 3 months. She has her mother's stubbornness. I never had any chance. A woman named Pearl, 80 years old, in Pennsylvania, lost a son to addiction at 29. Hadn't been able to say his name out loud for 11 years. After she read the letter I wrote to Caleb, she said her son's name out loud at the kitchen sink. Said it 3 times. Then she made his favorite dinner for the first time since he passed. A woman named Verna, 74, in Ohio. Her son hadn't called in 2 years. She wrote him a letter the way I describe in the book. Just what she'd been holding, set down plain. Mailed it. He called her the day he got it. They talked for 2 hours. A woman named Eunice, 78, down in Tennessee. Frank's wife, about the best woman Martha ever called a close friend. She read an early copy and that same evening sat down with her husband of 51 years and told him things she'd never said out loud. He cried like a child, she said. Then they sat on the porch together and watched the dark come in. My son Daniel called me from Charlotte last week. Said he didn't think I should be sharing these. Said his mother wouldn't have wanted strangers reading them. He might be right. I might take it down. I don't know yet. I put a link in the pinned comment under this video. It is there if you need it. That is all I'll say about it. Anyway, where was I? Right. I was telling you about the knife. I carry that pocket knife every morning when I get dressed. 64 years I have carried it. Before me, my daddy carried it. Before him, his daddy. Earl set it on this table in 1962, and I set it in Daniel's hand in 1984. And in both those moments, a man was trying to say something he had no language for. The knife went on. The words went unsaid. That is what I want you to hold tonight. Not the silence itself, but the fact that behind every silence there was something trying to get through. In every man who split the wood without saying it, who stayed year after year without saying it, there was love trying to get through that did not have a way out. The tragedy is not that those men stopped loving. The tragedy is that they never learned the only language that carries love all the way from one person to another without losing most of it on the way. The knife is still sharp after 64 years. I sharpened it last spring on a whetstone my daddy left in the barn. Some things he handed down I know exactly what to do with. The other thing, the words, I learned what to do with too late, but I learned it. If you are listening to me tonight, friend, and you are thinking about a man in your life, your daddy, your husband, whoever he was, a man who worked himself down to nothing for the people he loved, and never once said the word out loud. He said it. He said it in every cord of wood he split, in every year he stayed when leaving might have been easier. He said it in the only language he was ever given. That is not nothing, and it would have been more if he had known how. Both those things are true at the same time. It is not nothing, and it is not enough. Most of those men never knew there was a difference. I am a late man, friend. Don't you be one too.